Thank you, Ernest. Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome. It's good to be with you again. Today, we're going to talk about things that we always talk about, of course, the market. So we'll have a quick update on the market, what's been going on over the past 2 weeks and what's impacted supply and demand in that period. We'll also, for the most of the time, focus on what I've just decided to call the Asian giants, the major cashew countries in Asia, India, Vietnam, and of course, become really important, more recently, Cambodia. And we've 3 guests to help us talk about those 3 countries. Before we do, let me tell you that it is National Cashew Day, the 23rd of November. I found this on an interesting website in Australia, nutsforlife.com. Some interesting information there. And it's a good idea. It's a good concept. National Cashew Day. So happy National Cashew Day, what's left of it in Australia. Our guests today are from Vietnam. Jasvinder Singh Sethi, the General Manager of Agro. Agro is a young, multi-commodity sourcing and supply chain development business focused on excellent market information, as I found out when I worked with Jasvinder on pepper, and also focused on consulting and particularly management consulting. So we're really very pleased to welcome Jasvinder today for a perspective on the Vietnamese cashew sector. And we're going to do that through a series of short interviews. And then you can ask all of our guests questions that you'd like answers to on each of the countries. From Cambodia, we will be joined by a good friend of mine, Andara, the founder of Ample Agro Product Company. He is the president of the Cambodia Cashew Federation, and he has long history now in the business, being formerly involved with Santana Agro Products, and he's involved also not only in processing, but also in the provision of inputs and in the development of projects, growing projects, forestry, orchard plantation in Cambodia. Our third guest is from India, well known to many people, Mr. Amit Pai, the Managing Director of Amit Agro, Amit Cashew Industries. This business is a really innovative business. It's known for quality, it's known for reliability. It offers cashews in retail packs, private label, really flexible approach, really modern approach to cashew processing in India, based on technology, innovation, sustainability, all of those factors that worldwide we know are driving cashew trends. He's also the Joint Secretary of the Karnataka Cashew Manufacturers Association. So I'm very pleased to welcome him, and very pleased to welcome all of our 3 guests this morning. So let's move on to the markets and have a quick look there before we start to talk about the Asian giants. So what's been going on over the past 2 weeks? It's been a relatively quiet period. In terms of our 4 indicators: crops, raw cashew nut trade, kernels trade, and kernels prices, we don't see a great deal of movement. Crop-wise, East Africa, Brazil, Indonesia, we're not seeing a lot of news. It looks like it did about 2 weeks ago. Reasonable, maybe slightly disappointing crops in Tanzania. Brazil continues with its low level of production. If we look at the RCN trade, it has certainly picked up a little bit over the past 2 weeks. A little bit in Vietnam, probably a little bit more in India, where there's a certain replenishing of inventories going on. And we've seen more activity in East Africa, mainly Tanzania. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment, but we have seen slightly higher prices, a little bit more trade in the Tanzanian auctions. If we look at the kernels trade, again, a little bit of a pickup, certainly in India. It still continues to look like a pretty good year consumption-wise. We'll hear more about that later too. And in other markets, generally speaking, we've seen a little bit of pickup from what was a very quiet period, which caused prices to drop away. And finally, looking at 320 prices, West African prices continue roughly in the range. The range is rather wide at the moment, wider than it has been at any time over the past year or so, mostly because different requirements of different sellers. Some people have inventory, some people do not, but generally prices are still holding significant premiums over prices in Vietnam, which have themselves picked up a little bit. Whereas in India and Brazil, prices remain relatively steady. We're looking at a market now, I think, that is, in my opinion, in transition from a period of uncertainty, low prices, mainly driven from Vietnam, to a period where we might see more stable and steadily rising prices, but that remains to be seen. So let's have a look at some of the particular factors. Tanzanian auction is always important at this time of year. We have seen more trade in the past couple of weeks. Prices are, on a dollar basis, in a range of 760 to 830 per ton ex-warehouse, depending on location, depending on quality. And that's an improvement in prices of about $20 to $30 a ton. Before we get too carried away, don't forget, on top of those ex-warehouse prices, there's a lot of costs. Bring it to FOB, insurance, the cost of the freight, and of course the export tax. If we look at where we stand in the trade right now, you can still see, as we come toward the end of this week, comparing 2021 in the yellow bars to the current position for 2022, it's way behind in terms of sales. And that may be because the crop is coming in a little bit slower. It may also be because buyers are being a little bit more careful in their approach. So there's still a lot of business to be done. Let's have a look at the situation in India. So this is a calculated situation in India. And as you know, I like to compare the current year to 2019. I think it's a more realistic comparison than comparing to either of the disrupted pandemic years. And if you look at the situation, so the blue bars are the full year 2019 estimates, and the orange is this year, 2022, to date. So we're looking at the latest import figures for RCN being September figures. And if we look at that, what we see is that already record imports of raw cashew nuts to India, very strong demand trends, and it's likely that Indian buyers will continue in a relatively careful way, I think, to support the Tanzanian auctions and whatever balances remain in West Africa, and probably later come in for Mozambique material. It is quite remarkable, the level of imports, and it'll be interesting to talk a little bit later with our guest from India on this subject of what's brought this about. But we still, have big questions around about what is the level of domestic demand in India. It looks really positive. What's driving this? What's caused this situation to arise? Why now? And will it continue? Are big questions that will influence the entire market. India is, of course, the largest market in the world. Moving to have a look at Vietnam. Well, we see that although exports in the first half of November are lower than in the same period last year, that they're lower by something less than we've seen earlier in the year, only 4.4% down. Now, I say only 4.4% down because let's remind ourselves that 2021 was by far the biggest record year for exports from Vietnam. So when we compare 2022 with 2021, we're comparing with the all-time record year, and that's important to recognize. So we see a little bit of an improvement in exports in the first half of November. Imports, on the other hand, are still significantly down on last year and actually on other years too. So imports have faded away naturally enough. When RCN prices don't make a lot of sense compared to the kernels market, buyers are going to be reluctant. So the situation we see now emerging in Vietnam is that this period of inventory, adequate inventory, or calculated, and this is calculated, available stock, which largely depends on what the transit stock is. And maybe Jess can give us some guidance on that later. But what we are seeing, I think, generally over the past 8 weeks or so is that the available stock and afloat is reducing more quickly than the calendar is running on. So in other words, if you just calculate it based on my calculations, the stock runs out about the 18th of January. Is that a problem? Actually, it's not a problem, because don't forget, Vietnamese factories will not be particularly busy second half of January, usually. That's after the really busy period. So I don't really see any huge factors that will drive Vietnamese buyers to the market right now. With about a little over 2 months of stock after the end of November, based on these calculations, it's just about adequate. So general market outlook, the way I'm seeing it is, I would say that India needs to buy more raw cashew nuts before the new crop of 2023. Vietnam, well, I've written does not, but probably needs to buy less than you would expect, assuming that the Cambodian crop comes in on time and that the Vietnamese crop also comes in on time and is a good crop. It seems to me that the available stocks are just about enough right now, and there's no sign of any kind of shortage emerging in my mind. We have a situation where probably now the reality in general economies, the reality is hitting in. We have inflation. So the fear is now turned to reality, so we know what we're dealing with. And I would say that this is beginning to recede as a really concerning factor on demand. It is likely that Europe will have a recession next year, but it's less likely that other countries will. And it seems that the United States is forecast to avoid recession now. So fears of, and markets are largely driven by sentiment and often by fear. And this year has been full of that: fear of economic disaster, fear of escalation of the war in Ukraine. And those fears now appear to be receding, which should give more confidence to buyers as we get into next year. That means that demand in Europe and the United States particularly needs to be closely watched. Probably the level of forward cover is less than you would normally expect. Prices are low. There is a good chance that next year we will see strong return to demand. We don't know absolutely how demand will behave, particularly in Europe, in the event of a recession. But we do know that in the past, recessions have led to either very short-term impact on demand, or in actual fact, at times have caused demand to move upwards. And that's often based on the choices that people make on where they will spend their money. So it's often said that people tend to stay home more often when there's a recession, but that when they do, they consume more snacks. And of course, that fits right into cashew demand. There are still unusual weather patterns around. This is the third year of La Nina, the third year in a row, according to climatologists. This could have an impact. It did last year. It may well again this year. If you look at weather patterns in India, if you look at weather patterns in the Amazon, if you look at weather patterns in Cambodia, they are a little bit different to what would normally be expected. And in that, there is always a risk and a chance of some damage to crops, all kinds of crops, but especially cashews. Kernels prices, well, you don't need me to tell you that kernels prices still remain very attractive. Problem right now is that raw cashew nut prices are still out of line. So it's quite likely that buyers who need to buy would find these prices interesting, and that these prices would boost demand. And that may well be shown in 2023. It seems quite likely. But somehow RCN prices have to come in line. So they've been steadying, moving upwards in the last I suppose 4 weeks RCN prices have been slowly moving upward, but we're not seeing kernels really reflecting that as yet. So still a position as we come to the end of 2022, still a position of probably more questions than answers for the coming season. But I think in terms of the uncertainty and the concerns on demand, we're probably moving towards the end of that period. So it's going to be an interesting time, and it'll be particularly interesting for buyers of raw cashew nuts in West Africa once the season begins, and how to time their buying. And it will be especially difficult, I think, for governments in West Africa who will look to set minimum prices, reference prices at the farm gate during January and February. And that will be challenging this year. How to pitch that? How will the market behave over the course of the season? What is the exact inventory position on old crop before the new crop starts? And how will the crops, particularly where we have poor information, which still remains many countries, how to estimate the crops coming in there? Hopefully we might get some interesting input from our guests. So let's move on then to the subject that we want to talk about today. We're going to talk about these three Asian giants. So the way I'm proposing to do it is I'll give you an introduction. We'll talk about the three countries and their cashew structures, and then we'll come to our guests and give them plenty of time to talk. I'm going to ask some questions. They can answer the questions, and I hope that they'll elaborate however they see fit. So let's dig into it a little bit. First of all, production. So we're looking at production for 2022 and demand in 2021. So let's just focus in on our two key regions. India produces in 2022 about 15% of the world's crop. In Vietnam, Cambodia, and I've also included Indonesia and Thailand in that group, we're looking at about 24% of the world crop. In neither case has this been rising, but it has dramatically been rising in Cambodia. So let's have a look at the trends. So as we know, we've talked about it many times, over the period 2010 really onwards, Africa, especially West Africa, was fast growing production, driving world production growth. And that's been slowing in recent years. India has seen relatively slow growth over that period. So India, average growth of production in India has been about 1.3% per annum. And that's actually been slowing. A series of not so good crops have caused that. Vietnam, we haven't really seen growth in production in Vietnam for a number of years. It's relatively static. When we get a bad crop, when we get bad growing conditions, we get a very small crop. And Vietnam has become reliant on Cambodia, particularly in the early season. So whereas West Africa was the driver of production growth in the last decade, in the end of the last decade and the beginning of this decade, Cambodia has become the driver of world production growth. And you can see that in the chart. When we look at processing, we see a slightly different picture. 92% of the world's cashew processing is in two countries. Vietnam, with just under a half of all processing in the world, and India with about 44%. The two markets differ. Vietnam processes primarily for export, huge export volume to Europe and North America, large export volume to China, and Vietnam has a presence in just about every market worldwide. And it's broken into markets that were traditionally supplied from India, like Korea and like Japan. If we look at India, a larger producer, as we've seen, than Vietnam, but a very significant processor. And this year, given the high level of imports, it looks as if India will process a very large volume, probably the largest volume ever of cashews. But that is mostly focused on the domestic market. And again, I've put in a figure here of 320,000 tons. That is definitely open to discussion. It's based on what's come in, and it's based on a forecast for the years. That's certainly open to discussion. But it's not that important what the exact number is. What is important is that India grows, imports, and consumes. India's exports have declined in recent years, and this year it'll possibly be in the region of about 45,000 tons, unlikely to be more than 50 in any case. So we see two very different approaches. We will come to Cambodia shortly. So if we look then at the supply chains, what supplies these processing units, and what we see is India relies on imports for about 56%. This is a 2021 figure, for about 56% of its imports, of its processing, excuse me. So that compared to Vietnam, which is much more reliant on imported raw cashew nuts for processing. In 2021, by my calculations, Vietnam imported about 82% of its processing stock. We'll have a look at some of the major factors. So production, and I've just taken a perspective over 20 years from 2000 to 2020, just to give us an idea of the overall trends. So if we look at India, the blue bars, and Vietnam, the red bars, production over that 20-year period rose in both. India's production is far higher, and India's production has risen a little bit more quickly over that period. If we look at consumption, as I'm saying, India is the largest consumer of cashews in the world, a huge consumer, as you can see. Vietnam is a very small consumer of cashews. Most Vietnamese cashew kernels are exported. And this, of course, is reflected in the export trade. So what we've seen in the past 20 odd years is that Vietnam has entered the world stage and essentially taken over the supply of cashew kernels, just under 90% share of the US market, just under 80% share of the European market. The vast bulk of the Chinese market is supplied from Vietnam. India, in the meantime, as its domestic consumption has risen, has become less and less of a player in the export market of kernels. So today it's probably fair to say that the world price for export kernels is set in Vietnam, whereas in India we have a slightly different market structure, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So finally then, when we look at the import, in both countries we see strong trends in import. India has imported cashew kernels since the raw cashews since the 1980s. Vietnam really entered the import market early in the last decade, but came very strongly. And you can see the growth from virtually nothing in 2000 to just about 1.5 million tons by 2020 and higher since then. And if we just look at the RCN imports, again, Vietnam in blue, India in orange color, you can see that whereas Indian imports up to this year were relatively stable, maybe slightly depressed by the pandemic, have now started to spike upwards again, whereas Vietnam's imports have been steadily growing. I have recorded in 2021 the official figure, but I think there are very few people that actually believe that that figure is completely accurate. I'm sure that'll be amended at some point in the future. You might notice I mentioned Pro Cashew here because these charts were compiled on some work done for the Pro Cashew project. If we look at where these two countries buy their raw cashews, we see some contrasts. So if we look, again, Vietnam in blue, India in orange, So Vietnam is buying a lot in Cote d'Ivoire, Cambodia, Nigeria, whereas Indian buying is much more spread out, and Indian buyers have a preference for certain origins, Ghana, Benin particularly, but also Tanzania, based on 2020 figures. So India much more likely to pay higher price for higher quality RCN than Vietnam. Vietnam has a much bigger volume requirement, especially in 2020, and looks to its neighbor, Cambodia, naturally, and Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria for the bulk of its supplies. If we look at India then a little bit more closely, so the key thing to understand about India, that India consumes about 85% of the cashews it processes. It is the largest market. And the Indian market is, or at least the Indian kernels market, is protected by import duties, a ban on the import of kernels effectively. That means the Indian kernels market is not accessible. And that makes sense because from an Indian government's point of view, they wish to protect their farmers and their processing industry. And they've done this by introducing a certain amount of protection. India is a very quality conscious market. The color of cashews, the taste is very, very important to the Indian consumer. And the market trades at significant premiums over the international market. These vary depending on the international market, but of course this year they're quite wide because we've seen quite low prices. Another factor about India to note is that there are multiple applications for cashews in India. Cashew is an important ingredient, and therefore there's a large usage of broken cashews as well as wholes. You can see just briefly that exports of cashew kernels from India have declined. So back when I started trading, the place you bought cashew kernels was India. Today, the place you buy cashew kernels, more than likely, as a European or a North American buyer, would be in Vietnam. If we look at the Vietnamese sector, we see something slightly different. We see, first of all, a wide variety of structure of the industry. We see large plants. We see, to a certain extent, the separation of shelling and the rest of the process, but we also see some smaller processors with, let's say, smaller scale, sometimes on contract basis. Sometimes we also see simple packing stations that pick up the product from a range of factories and prepare it for export. So it's a highly structured industry in Vietnam. It's been based on the development of technology and on innovation going right back 30 years ago, really, when processing started in Vietnam. That's always been the case. It's been based on high investment and large scale processing and an entrepreneurial and highly organized business culture that's caused Vietnam to become the world leader in processing and export of cashew nuts. The Vietnam cashew story really is quite new. It goes back, in terms of commercialization, not more than 40 years. And Vietnam has really only become a power in the cashew industry over the last 20 years. Even more recent entrant in terms of commercial power in the industry is Cambodia. And you can see Cambodia production from relatively steady basis going way back has exploded in recent years. And that's been based on new plantings and high yielding varieties. Still, most Cambodian cashews, more than 97%, are exported in shell to Vietnam. And if we look at the Cambodian situation, it's gone from 5% production share to 15% production share in just 5 years. Of course, those trees were planted a little earlier, but this is the big story of recent years in the world cashew supply situation. Cambodia supplies some good quality cashew nuts, often very large sizes, which is also interesting. And it has, although it's seen a little fallback, I think, in production this year, it looks set to continue as a major producer of cashew nuts for the foreseeable future. So what has this meant? Well, in simple terms, it's meant about 500,000 tons more raw cashews every year in the past 5 years as production has increased. It has meant that Vietnam has a closer production than previously, giving more time and less dependence on supply from West Africa. And it also means that the kind of situation that we saw in 2017, where Vietnamese buyers came in early and pushed the RCN market, is far less likely to be repeated. And if we look at that in terms of the monthly supply, so this chart is a monthly harvested supply of in-shell cashew nuts. Orange is India, blue is Vietnam, Cambodia together. So if we look at the total supply month by month, we can see it's no surprise that production peaks in March and April. And then if we look at potential availability of those raw cashew nuts, taking into account the time taken to ship the cashew nuts to destination for processing, again, 92% between Vietnam and India, we see how the supply works out in the course of the year. And what has Cambodia's a rise in production? What has it meant in terms of this calendar? Well, it's meant two things. Obviously, more cashew nuts, and more cashew nuts in this period, February, March, April. It's also meant that the overall supply has been shifted a little bit earlier in the year, simply because if you grow in West Africa and you ship all the way to Vietnam, you're probably looking at 3 months by the time the product has moved, shipped, arrived, discharged, ready for processing. Movement in Cambodia is a matter of days. So this means that the availability for Vietnamese processors, as things stand, has shifted earlier in the year. They will buy Cambodian raw cashew nuts. It's on their doorstep. It's competitive. It's high quality. So it has reduced then their need to come to West Africa earlier in the season. And we've seen that in recent years. Maybe the pandemic slightly distorted that, but certainly this year we have seen that Vietnamese buyers can take their time coming to the market because they now have this huge, this year, the second largest producer in the world, they have this huge supply from Cambodia. And without much processing in Cambodia so far, although we may see that in the future, that supply is available. So this has had a fundamental impact on the timing as well as the volume available in the market. And this has happened over a relatively short period of time. And it's not surprising if we take this factor plus the impact of the pandemic, which should not be underestimated and is ongoing. It's not surprising that we see a disrupted market. And this is one of the reasons why it's far more likely now that we're seeing this mismatch between kernels and RCN prices. And this again is a factor that, as I mentioned earlier, that if we talk about governments in West Africa looking at reference or minimum pricing come January, February, March, that they need to consider this factor. And that's something that previously we wouldn't have thought about, simply because Cambodia was producing maybe 250,000 tons of raw cashew nuts, and that's now somewhere above 700,000 tons. So this has been a huge impact. So when we look at these three Asian giants, we see Vietnam highly dependent on import of raw cashew nuts, but dominating the world export trade in cashew kernels. We see Cambodia primarily a producer of good quality cashew nuts, but perhaps with ambitions to change that and develop its own process. And we see India less dependent on imports than Vietnam, but nonetheless dependent on imports for more than half its supply. But most of that is consumed in India in a market which is, in terms of kernels, isolated from the rest of the world market, by various levels of protection of the sector, the growing and the processing of cashews in India. So there's a quick overview. So what I'd like to do then is to come to our guests. And I was going to start with Jasvinder from Agro. Let me ask Blessing or Ernest, do you see Jasvinder online with us?
Yes, we are setting him up.
Okay.
So let us get, yeah, sure.
So let's, let me remind you, Jasvinder is from Agro, an innovative sourcing and supply chain management company, which has been in business, I think, since 2015, made huge steps in that period. I know Jasvinder from working on pepper development in Cambodia, and I was impressed by his level of knowledge and his analysis of the market. So, Jasvinder, are you with us? Can you hear me?
Jim, can you start with Amit or Andara?
Okay, no problem at all. So
yes, please.
Let's talk about Cambodia then, to start with. So let me just reorganize it a little bit. Andara, how are you?
I'm very, very fine. Good afternoon from Cambodia.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you online.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I had a few questions. I'm going to put them on the slide so that listeners and viewers can see that as we talk. We all have been maybe somewhat amazed by the arrival of Cambodia as such a huge producer and to become one of the top 3 producers in the world. What do you think are the main factors that have made this happen?
Yes, thank you very much for the very good question. And first of all, I would like to thank you, Jim, for providing me a great opportunity on behalf of Cambodia to join this kind of important forum. And another thing is thank you very much for the people who organize ACA for the Global Market Encounter. So the point that Cambodia now become the very dynamic in terms of the cashew production, because the one thing is about the land availability. That is a very important thing, that we have a very what we call like a unique land. It's a northern part of the Tonle Sap Great Lake, which is very good, favorable for the cashew nut production. That is one thing. And another thing, that the cashew nut, it is not difficult to grow. It is very, very easy to grow. But we need a little bit of a maintenance. I mean, not a little bit, but we need a lot of maintenance. It depends on the variety. And another thing is about the market. So we are very lucky because we are close to Vietnam. So the thing that Vietnam has, I mean, the buyer, they can buy everything, not only the good quality of cashew nut from Cambodia, but they also have the market to buy the bad quality also. And another thing is like you know, when the farmer, they are doing a proper maintenance and selecting a very good seedling, so they can earn I mean a better benefit compared to other crops in Cambodia. Like I used to say that, you know, like in Cambodia, there's the big area for the rice. And then the government try to encourage about the rice. But when we are talking about the cashew nut, is you know, like we produce a very good quality cashew nut, as you already mentioned in this meeting. And you know, if we can do it properly, so the price that we can sell to Vietnam is like you know, $0.5 US per kg. So it's about like 1,500 US dollar per ton. So that is good, like if we are talking about the people, they may have like, the small holder for the cashew nut, at least they have like 2 or 3 or 5 hectares. So that's good for them on the top of other business apart from agriculture, especially for the cashew nut. So that is the key that and we know that now the government try to encourage a lot for the agriculture, because the agriculture in Cambodia, they contribute to 20% of the total GDP. So, and cashew is one of the very high value crop that contribute to that one. Even we don't really have a good facility to process a very standard kernel for the international market. But we are now working on that one in order to improve our processing facility in order to get a very good kernel in order to penetrate the market, especially in US and in Europe, that they require the good quality nut from Cambodia that we are looking for. That's all about my point according to your question. But if you have any more question, then you can ask.
Well, I suppose the question that many of us are asking now is, how do you see this proceeding over the medium term, maybe over the next 3 to 5 years? Will we see stabilization, or will we see an increase or decrease in production? What do you think?
I think that the key thing that we are talking about the cashew nut is the main thing is about the climate change. So let's say like this year the climate condition is not so good, so the production is going down, and people try to change a little bit to the cassava. But for me, I will see that because there's a lot of new land, a lot of farmers, they are trying to grow more cashew nut, and they happy with the cashew nut. They say that this is the problem, not because of not because of the market, but it's because of the way that they are taking care of the plantation. So from my point of view, I think even this year, I think the production of the cashew nut, the raw cashew nut in Cambodia will be growing up. And in the next 3 or 5 years, I guess there will be more and more cashew nut, because like now in Cambodia, there's a lot of the debate related to the production. For example, like this Ministry of Agriculture, they are talking about this amount, and then international development partner, they are talking about this, and for example, like the importer like Vietnam, the Vinaca, they are talking about like 1 million ton or something like that. So this kind of thing that we are missing a lot. And then in terms of Cambodia Cashew Nut Federation that we just established, we will coordinate with all the relevant stakeholders in order to get this reliable data, and we hope that we will have more about the production, and then in the future, I think that there will be more and more, because there's a lot of support, especially the buyer from Vietnam, and then the new processing facility in Cambodia, and there's a lot of the technical support from the international development partner and the government in order to improve the production.
Okay, it's interesting. I think we'd love to see some really good figures on production in Cambodia sometime in the future. So let's hope the Federation can achieve that. But we both of us mentioned the quality of Cambodian cashew nuts and the reputation for good quality. Can you tell us a little bit about the quality characteristics of Cambodian cashews?
That is a very good question. I think our partner in Vietnam, they already appreciate the quality of the cashew nut. In Cambodia, we have a few variety that very good quality. So the one that we are appreciate is the 23, which is you already know. And we know that the 23, there's a Cambodian variety produced by Cambodian people in Cambodia. And I think there's more and more farmers, they are trying to grow the 23 because of the production, and another thing is about the quality also. And the 23, you know, there's for the nut, you know, there's the big nut, where maybe we can say one of the biggest nuts in the world. So whenever we process 23, so we will get the kernel of WW160 and WW180 the most. And then there's the big kernel. That is one thing about the kernel, and the color is very unique. The color is not white like other, but there's like you know, the ivory color, like an ivory color. And then the taste is very, you know, the taste is very good, because no, we are proud of our kernel, because the taste is like it's not hard, it's like soft and like a milky. So that's like, you know, kind of like a milky, so and it's a little sweet. So, and that is about the taste. And another thing is we are talking about the nutrient for the human health. So Cambodian cashew kernel has more a good nutrient than other. So we have the data. So if you want, then I can send you the data for that one also. And normally when we test, there's no cholesterol for Cambodian cashew nut. So that is the important factor of or characteristic of Cambodian cashew nut that we are, you know, like appreciated by the international buyer. But the problem, there's also the problem that because of the quality, we need to get a higher price. But now seems that the world, they don't really accept the higher price because of the COVID and also the Ukraine war. Yeah.
I must say, I've always been very impressed by the quality of the cashews, particularly the size of the kernels that I see when I visit Cambodia. They're really, there is something different about Cambodian cashews for sure. But what about processing in Cambodia? How is the development of processing going?
That is a very, very good question. And that is the Cambodian, not only the private sector, but also the international development partner and the public sector try to have a lot in order to improve the processing facility in Cambodia. So far, you know, we sell a lot of raw cashew nut to Vietnam and other neighboring countries. And we process only 5%. But now the government try to, you know, set up what we call national cashew policy. And they also have the new investment law in order to encourage the company not to get the tax for like 6 years or something like that. So what we hope that we will take this kind of then opportunity to process more cashew nut. And now there are a few more, not a lot, but a few more standard factory that they are trying to process in Cambodia. And we are very lucky also that we are close to Vietnam. So we have a, you know, like a kind of like a buying the technology from Vietnam, which is the border, and to process in Cambodia. Even we don't really have the standard yet for that machine, but at least, I mean, more and more local investors, they will try to, for example, like process in order to get the semi-kernel. And then there's a few standard company that they already have set up the what we call like a standard machine in order to produce the standard kernel for international market. For international market, they will try, you know, they will try to collect from them, and then you know, they will try to expand more market, because, you know, in Cambodia if we are talking about the processing, we don't really have a big investor from international country to come and do investment because there's maybe a lot of things related to high cost. For example, like logistic cost is very high, electricity is very high, and the labor is not so skillful, you know, something like that. So, but the government try to work a lot, and then even the international development partner, as I said, and then the private sector, they are trying to work together in order to find a way to process more and more cashew nut for international market. And we expect that in the, you know, like the next 5 to 10 years, we might be able to process up to 20 to 25% of our raw cashew nut. That is what we expect.
Okay, we'll certainly be watching that with interest. Andara, thank you very much. You are one of the pioneers of the Cambodian cashew industry, and thank you very much for joining us today. But stay with us, because there will be some questions, no doubt, as we go on. So please stay with us. By the way, everyone, if you would like to find out more about Ampel Agro products, I've put their website on the slide, and it's interesting to visit. It's a good website, and there's a lot of interesting information there. So thank you very much. Stay with us. I'm not sure, has Jasvinder joined us, Ernest?
Amit will be ready, and then afterwards we take Jasmine.
Okay, very good. Well, let's move to another pioneer in the cashew industry, this time for Mr. Amit Pai of Amit Cashew Industries. Good afternoon to you, sir. How are you?
Hi, Jim. Doing good.
Good. Glad to hear it. Thanks very much for joining us today. We're trying to cover huge subjects in a very few minutes, so I thought we'd put a few questions together. And the big question for a lot of us this year is the surge in imports of raw cashew nuts. What are the factors that have caused this huge increase this year in the imports of RCN?
Well, you know, a lot of things happened together in 2022. To begin with, India has added significant processing capacity in the past 2 years after COVID, and consumption also has been continuously increasing in our country post-COVID. What happened was in 2021, the Indian processors or the entire country ended with almost zero raw cashew nut inventory. And everybody who had a stock at that point of time was able to cash in and make good profits on whatever stocks they had. Now, this led to a scene where, you know, everybody, almost all the processors in the country, all the stockists, bought a little more than they normally do, which is what led to a huge input of raw cashew nuts from Benin or Ivory Coast into India this year. Now, this was also, you know, aided or fueled by the narrative of short crop. People wanted to cover in India when the prices were, you know, more reasonable. Now, we ended up buying a large part of our requirements from West Africa. We even, you know, bought a lot of Bissau this year. India looks pretty much covered until the next 3-4 months. And at the end of this year, again, we might be left with very little carryover stock in the country. I think this is, you know, why we saw
in that we had how much ton Vietnam exported for the first 10 months, etc. That was your presentation.
Ernest, if you could just
yeah.
Okay, we're good. Amit, please continue.
Yeah, we can move to the next question.
So for us, will this growth in demand, will this growth in imports and consumption, will it be sustained in the medium or the long term?
Yes, of course, because the growth in demand for kernels that we saw is happened because of a shift in the consumption pattern. Now, demand in India has been fairly on a growth path ever since we've started tracking the industry. During COVID, what happened was a lot of Indian consumption, you know, a lot of Indian consumers shifted from salty and sweet snacks or cookies to the healthier options the dry fruits and nuts. Also, the trade generally moved from bulk packaging formats to retail formats, making the kernels more accessible to the consumers. Now, this has formed a habit in the consumers wherein a large chunk of people in our country have shifted from these unhealthy snacks to the healthier snacks. Of course, when people are binge watching and sitting on movies or sitting with other stuff, they're still going back to the wafers and the namkeens. But in a lot of places, we see cookies going out and these dry fruits and nuts coming in. Now, this shift of habits is pulling up the demand. Also, a very interesting thing that we saw in India this year was during the festive gifting season, almost everybody I spoke to said that they received 1/10 the amount of sweets that they would earlier receive, and everything was replaced by dry fruits and nuts. So gifting of dry fruits and nuts has really gone up in India this year during the festive season. That has resulted in a small drop in sales for us in the month of November. But when people get addicted to the nuts, they will start buying more, and we are, gung-ho about the upcoming demand.
Wow, that's a shift is the word. That's quite remarkable. So you've got health and health concerns driving consumption. So that is likely to sustain demand growth. But also really interesting to the rest of the world is the variety of uses that cashews are put to in India. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the thing is, in India, there is, people say that there's a grade for everything that you want in India. So I can think of classifying it to 4 or 5 categories. The first thing is gifting. Traditionally in India, cashew has been associated with the prosperity of the giver. If I am prospering, when I go to a place, I give them cashews. This has been the mentality all across the country, which is why it is so popular as a gift. When I'm visiting a relative or a friend, if I take a pack of cashews, it shows a lot of warmth and affection. This is also the reason why, cashews are sent out with invite boxes in India, invites for functions like weddings or any other family functions. Normally, cashews go along with the invitation. So gifting is one major, consumption pattern in our country. The second use I can think is of table snacks. Now it primarily ends up losing out to peanuts and groundnuts because of the cost and the other factors. But higher up the classes in India, it's very common to see roasted cashews accompanying tea, coffee, or even a nice glass of scotch. Sweets and confectionery, the less I talk about it, the better it is, because in India, there are hundreds of items. You can, hundreds of sweet meats that are made out of cashews. The texture, it's the texture that.
So we've lost you.
Amit, your audio is off. If you can put on your audio.
I accidentally
Very good.
muted.
Yeah.
So, a lot of sweets, cashew, the texture that it gives to the sweets in India, that is irreplaceable. So that is one category where most of our brokens are going. A lot of whole cashew nuts have now started getting into the savory snacks as well, the salted snacks, what we call as namkeens in India. So that is becoming a big growth driver for especially the larger grades. You're talking of 180s, 210s, 240s. These are getting into the namkeen markets. The last, category that I can think of is horeca. That's a vast category in India. There is no North Indian gravy that is made without cashew, and there is no South Indian dessert that's made without cashew. So, in India, there is a wide set of application for all of this.
Wow. So we're talking about a product that is very deep-seated in culture and in food habits throughout the country.
Yep.
There's a lot. We can all learn a lot from that, I think. But it does beg the question, with increasing demand, wide range of uses, what about production in India? We've seen the growth has been relatively slow. What are the prospects for an improvement in the rate of increase of production?
Well, the rate of growth of production of cashew is not happening at it's not matching up with the pace of processing in the country, primarily because there's a difference in the there's a large gap in the expectations. The farmers have set a higher expectation for their products because their costs are higher in India, whereas the processors are not able to meet that because there's a counter offer coming from the African continent. Now, what we tend to understand is the yield or the output that a farmer gets in India as compared to rubber or any other cash crop with cashew is significantly lower. So one thing that can really take off cashew plantation in India is if we are able to derive some value or get some value for the cashew apple. And that is when, it will start becoming more profitable for the farmer to grow the crop in India. Or otherwise, we are also, requesting the government to allocate the large swathes of wastelands that our country has. Plant these saplings there and allow the marginalized community to pick it up and sell it to the close by factories. This will help in upliftment of the community as well. Also, it will help us in being self-reliant on cashew production. A lot of state governments in India are very keen on all these aspects, and they are continuously trying to work with the state associations on seeing the possibilities of expanding raw cashew nut growth in even the non-traditional areas. Now, the growth that you showed in your first slide in India in the past 20 years is primarily come out of the non-traditional areas. And this is where I think, a large chunk of the future growth in India would be coming from.
It's interesting. So the production has kind of moved. I always look at it and I think it's moved sort of north and east.
Yes.
But it hasn't risen that quickly. So it sounds to me as if this is still a kind of medium long-term project and we won't see fast growth in production for some years.
Of course, it should take a few years for it to materialize.
Okay. It's really interesting. The Indian cashew market is absolutely fascinating. If you want to know more about Amit Cashew Industries, the website is on the slide. It's a really interesting website. And if you're a cashew processor in Africa and you're going to build a website or a business, there's a lot you could learn from having a look. Amit Pai, thanks very much. Stay with us. I'm sure we'll have some questions.
Sure, pleasure. Thank you.
So let's move to Vietnam. I think Jasvinder is with us now.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jim?
Not bad at all. Thanks very much for joining us today. I'd just like to start in a way where we left off with Amit on production. So production in Vietnam, like India, has been relatively static in recent years. Do you think there's any prospect for that to change and for productions to start to increase again?
Oh, well, I think in somewhere around 2008 and 2009, we saw a lot of cashew trees being cut and replaced by other crops like coffee and black pepper, etc. in Vietnam. Vietnam used to have somewhere close to 500 to 600,000 hectares at one point in time. And that slowly went down to somewhere around 300 to 400 1,000 hectares. And right now our crop is somewhere close to 350 to 400. So we've been stagnating at that level, mostly into the two provinces of Binh Phuoc and a little bit in Baria and GLI. What is also stopping them from expanding in cashew is that cashew still in Vietnam is not a very organized cultivation. And surprisingly, what happened in Cambodia, just in the neighboring country, there has been enormous cashew plantation over there with various varieties, and Vietnamese have been able to procure that cashew during their season because Cambodian season complements Vietnamese season. It is just after a few weeks, and you could buy Cambodian product in Vietnam almost in local currency. So we've seen the crop on that side growing, And but on this side of the border in Vietnam, other than Binh Phuc, other provinces mostly are you enter into highlands and then you see coffee and other cash crops. So that, and Cambodia not having coffee and not having a better alternative to cashew is maybe an incentive for them to grow cashew, but for Vietnamese, it is still better to be into coffee and other cash crops. And we've not seen prices really scaling up for Vietnamese cashew farmers. What we must understand also is Vietnam is 99% an export business-led business, and Vietnam is mostly exporting to the US and Europe, and it is mostly a roasting market. Vietnam doesn't have their local domestic consumption like India. For all practical purposes, China is the domestic market of Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam has good cashews, and most of it is, the best and white color and crunchy cashew moves to China, which gives a premium. But of course, due to geopolitical reasons, the border could be shut, which we saw this year. Due to COVID, we've had issues where the border is shut and product could not move out. So there was no parity at all this year when we consider the raw cashew nut prices for Vietnam. On the other hand, there was some parity in India because domestic prices were higher. The plants had shut down during COVID, and as Amit said, there was not much stock, so a lot of inventory moved to India initially. And Vietnam, we've seen imports dropping. We've seen exports of kernels also dropping. So this has also been I would say, a deterrent for looking at cashew to expand as such. When you have a neighboring country with such a large plantation and huge crop coming in, Cambodia and Vietnam put together would be somewhere close to, or just touching close to now, maybe 800 or 900,000 tons both together. So that supply is available. So having that thinking is there, that then is there a sufficient reason for them to go ahead and plant more cashews? So I think we would see stagnation continuing in Vietnam for some time because there is supply available.
Okay, it makes perfect sense with supply so closely available in Cambodia. It's been a tough year for everyone, I think, in cashews, but in Vietnam we've heard much about factories closing or reduced consumption. Is this a permanent feature, or will we see these factories reopen or increase their production again next year?
Yeah, so I think two things to consider. If you look at 2021, Vietnam had a record export because some part of it is because there was lockdowns in India. A lot of inventory moved to Vietnam. Vietnam processed, and they shipped out somewhere close to 550,000 tons of kernels. This was a record export from Vietnam. So processing capacity is not a problem as such. Vietnamese have been able to ramp up production when required. Now, the mechanization that has happened in Vietnam over the last 6 to 7 years has enabled the factories to, do a turn on and turn off kind of an process. If there is no parity, I would just turn off my machines and we would stop production. No longer there are the worries that, okay, what will my labor do? And, I have so many people, and once I let them go, they won't come back. Because that was a worry, I think, 7-8 years back, because most of the processing was manual. But now, after your cutting operations have become fairly mechanized, it has enabled the raw cashew nut processors to shut shop when there is no parity, and again start the machines when parity comes in. So right now, we are seeing in last 3 months, because there was no parity, because our kernel prices fell as low as $2.5 per pound for a 320, and raw cashew nut prices were hovering as high as $1,400. So there was absolutely no parity, and it has also reflected that Vietnam has imported 35% less this year, and Vietnam has exported 15% less this year of kernels. So Vietnamese processors have shut shop or closed down factories to avoid production losses. Some processors were still working because there was parity in the shell prices, which goes for the boiler feed. They were getting good prices for that. But now those prices have also come down. So basically, when there is no parity, they are able to turn off the tap. And once there is parity, they are able to turn on the tap.
Okay.
And so if next year there is parity, the prices are good and things work out, Vietnam can once again scale up. So that has made them a flexible processing origin in that sense.
Okay, that's really interesting. And that's a kind of an impact or a benefit of mechanization effectively.
Right.
So I've heard in this general discussion on processing in Vietnam, we heard some from official sources, from unofficial sources, discussions about higher levels of value addition, consumer packs, roasting. Is there a change of policy? Will we see more consumer packed cashews exported from Vietnam?
I think we have to understand one thing here is that the government per se in Vietnam has left the trade to figure out what is best for the trade themselves, and they do not intervene in fixing prices or put a floor price and all these things, and which allows the trade to move in a direction where they find it is logical for them to continue operations. And one part of that is, the small and medium scale enterprises, which did not have even HACCP before. They've got HACCP, they've got BRC, they've graduated to food safety factories, and next is where they're looking at, in terms of validation. So they have been able to set up machines to do dry roasting, to do oil roasting, to do roasting with the skin and salt it, etc. So over the last 3 years, we've seen value addition happening in Vietnam. It was started by large corporates like Danone Food and Olam and etc., and which is now percolated down at the SME level. So you're right, we are seeing a lot of roasting happening in Vietnam. And why this is happening also is because the destinations like Middle East, which want raw cashews to be really white and crunchy, they typically look at India for sourcing. But when it comes to a roasted product, it doesn't matter if Vietnam is going to give them a roasted product, because after roasting, eventually you are going to have a yellow cashew, etc. So they found a new market now in Middle East, which is accepting the roasted product from Vietnam. And we are seeing a lot of shipments now happening from Vietnam to Middle East, where Middle East was not really a typical market for Vietnam. So the roasting that would happen perhaps in Dubai or Jeddah or on these places is now happening in Vietnam, and the traders are able to get roasted product straight from Vietnam, and not just roasted. They've come up with chili, honey flavor, wasabi flavor, and corn syrup and sweet, and you can find a host of flavors now available in Vietnam. I would still not say that the big companies in US and Europe are coming and buying this, because they may have their own worries and they may be their processors themselves. But definitely Middle East is coming and buying because they see value in this, because it's mostly a distribution kind of a business.
That is that's really interesting. It seems to make a lot of sense to me that you would process to as far as possible, in as close as possible to where the goods are originally shelled and graded. Jasvinder, thanks very much for that contribution. It's much appreciated. And I'd like to remind everyone that the Agro website is well worth a visit. It's a very interesting company. It's a very interesting business model. They've done a really great job in a short period of time. Well worth a visit. Have a look at their website. So let me thank Jasvinder again. Let me thank our 3 guests for their really interesting contributions. What I'll do is I will hand it back to Ernest. Have you got any questions for us, Ernest?
Thank you very much, Jim, and also thank you to our guests. They have answered pretty much most of the questions that we had, but then there are 2 which any of them can take. Indeed, I will even suggest that all of them try to answer it. The first question is about whether indeed kernel prices are attractive currently. Because I think, Jim, in your presentation, you have talked about that kernel prices are attractive. And the questioner wants to know whether indeed for them, from Vietnam, India, and Cambodia, in their perspective, also from processing perspective, whether indeed kernel prices are attractive currently.
Maybe just
any of you can, yes.
Jasvinder, would you like to start us off on that one?
Yeah, okay. I just see, my view is that kernel prices are attractive, no doubt, but we have to look at the consumption volume. I mean, we see that there is a little bit of drop in consumption when the prices go too high, like $5 per pound, etc. But generally, cashew volumes are quite stable. You know, you do not have demand fluctuation in a large manner. If you look at historical data, what has happened in last 2 or 3 years is we've seen a geopolitical event which has taken the entire fundamentals of most commodities for a toss. You know, things are just, you know, been shaken up, and the fundamentals of economics are not playing here. Let me just give you an example. Now, when the COVID started, a consumer is going to a retail mall and buying product which he was buying for, say, 8 weeks in just matter of 1 week and stocking up in his house. Suddenly the shelves became empty. The purchase manager started ordering inventory. After that came the logistics nightmare where you don't get a container, you are not getting vessels, nothing is possible. The purchasers are thinking, though, now inventory will not come, let me order more. So because of this, in 2021, everybody ordered much more than what they needed. Come 2022, we have seen inventory in US and Europe at various warehouses at least piled on for next 6 to 7 months. So they have a lot of stock. And then suddenly they are not buying for the next 6-7 months. Then in 2022 came the Ukraine war, followed by a huge financial turmoil. You know, interest rates are going up, inflation is there. So you had very large 3 geopolitical events, and of course China's lockdown. So as a cashew processor or cashew trader, I cannot imagine what the president of China is thinking or what Mr. Putin is thinking, and neither can we control that. Because of these 2 leaders who would have taken some action, markets have, you know, had ripple effects. China being locked down, product cannot flow there. They need it. They need the cashew. Consumption is there, demand is there, but the border is closed, so we cannot ship to them. Likewise, US and Europe has a lot of stock, so they are not interested in buying. So we suddenly saw a huge demand erosion in 2022. Never it has happened that we've seen 6 months of no buying. And this was not looked at by the raw cashew nut sellers, whether it was Ivory Coast or whether it was Ghana or any other country. They were still not willing to align themselves with the reality of the market. And they said, no, we still expect higher prices for our raw cashew nut. Had they come in line with what the kernel prices are, they would have sold faster and at much better prices than suffering a lot of pain now. Because when they postpone their sales and they are waiting for, you know, for looking at liquidity, but that never comes. And then everybody panics and starts pressing the panic button, and prices come down even faster. So what we're trying to say over here is, it is at any price point, if consumption is there, people are still going to buy cashew. Cashew is an expensive item. What difference does it make if I'm buying it at 2.5 or if I'm buying it at $3 per pound? Not really much, right? Here, the problem that has happened is that there was an erosion of demand, not postponement, just erosion. Product could not flow to different countries. Next year, I think the situation would be different. And yes, there would be a 6 months of time lag. And after that, once the inventories are lower, people will come back to buy. Now, whether current prices are attractive, yes, they are attractive. We are seeing already buyers from Europe and US coming back in last 2 weeks and trying to cover for their Q1 requirements of next year. right? But they are still not biting Q2. They are still saying, okay, January to April is what we would like to buy. But beyond that, we want to wait. Because they know that new crops are coming in again, starting next February from West Africa. And then they want to take their bets for the balance part of the year. So maybe next year is going to be a year for correction. For all the pain that we have seen this year, we will see some correction next year of inventories, correction in prices, correction in expectation. And then in 2024, we see a normal market where the laws of economics will work out based on supply and demand. Right now, we still need to see China opening. Today, Beijing has just announced that we will shut down again. So if a large consumer like China keeps on shutting down and we are not able to supply those 80 or 100,000 tons of kernels to them, I mean, that is 500,000 tons of raw cashew nut demand by such a big country. And if they are not going to consume, then raw cashew nut will not be processed. And then we will again have the same issue next year that processors are not seeing parity and not willing to process. So we need to watch maybe 2-3 things very closely. Interest rates, we need to watch what happens in China, and we need to watch what is happening in the Middle East also. In my opinion, US is not a problem. I mean, their currency is dollars. They do not have any problems in importing. Dollar is getting stronger everywhere. And our currencies are depreciating in Africa, in India, in Vietnam, everywhere. So their purchasing power is going up. But we are seeing problems in Middle East and I would say in China. If these two regions open up completely next year, then I feel that the prices can move up from here even to by another 10-15%.
Thank you.
Right now, yeah, I'm taking too much time, but I need to explain this what is happening, right? So,
I
when
think,
we say, are the prices going to go up or are these prices attractive? It all depends on what is the inventory. Now, if China cannot buy, then even if the price becomes $2, it is still not attractive because the border is closed. What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that's appreciated outside Vietnam is the influence of the Chinese market on the overall demand, especially at particular times of year. China is somewhere between 10 and 12% of world demand. The Middle East is somewhere in the region of 6%. From an Indian point of view, Amit Pai, do you feel that these current prices are attractive, either on RCN or on cashew kernels?
On RCN, India is sitting on slightly higher priced inventory now. So, but on the kernel side, the prices are very, very attractive in the Indian market, and it is, I can say that it is attractive to a limit wherein it is actually boosting consumption. We've never had 320s at these levels. We never had brokens at these levels. And plus, since we've got all these grades going to different categories, each of these categories growing on its own, which is why pricing wise, in India, the kernels is at a very comfortable level. Since we're not a large exporter, maybe everything that Jaswinder just spoke about, I can say it doesn't apply much to us, but within the country, it's going at a very comfortable level.
Okay, that's interesting. I must say, I think that given the strong trends worldwide in consumption of tree nuts and dried fruits, mainly based on health considerations, that low prices or relatively low prices for cashew nuts do lead for huge potential. I mean, it's very hard to say when that will kick in, but you've got to say, as Jaswinder has said, maybe it is 2024, but at some point there's going to be a serious reaction to these prices from consumers. But the decisions are probably not made in the shops or in the markets. They're made in the boardrooms. And at the moment, they're reluctant to push out too far forward, would be my reading on it. Ernest, what next have you got for us question-wise?
Actually, Cambodia is a small market when you talk about the kernels, but probably Andara has some views on the attractiveness of the prices, yes, before we move on.
Okay, thank you for your question. I think for me, I strongly support that yes, the kernel is very attractive, you know. In Cambodia, if that's why the people they are the farmer they are shifting from the variety that grow with the small nut to the big nut. So we know that 23 is the big nut that we can sell in a higher price. For example, if we sell the raw cashew nut to Vietnam, so the price between the small kernel and the big kernel is different. And the problem that the world market now, they are talking about 320, but Cambodia, we have more about 180, 160, 210 or something like that, that we have a lot. So this kind of thing that we still have a problem that the farmer, they don't really, I mean, most of them, and not all, but most of them, they don't really know how to harvest properly, how to dry properly, how to stock properly. If they can do this properly, so the price will be higher. And you have the guy from Vietnam, they know, you know, even not the factory, but even the middleman, they also can give the higher price to the big kernel. That is one thing about the raw cashew nut. But if we are talking about the kernel, this is about the kernel. We, you know, I try to find the market in Europe, and then also in US. They also want to buy the big kernel, but the thing that they have a problem that they don't really want to pay in a higher price. That is the key. And another thing that we still have the room to do now, we have the buyer in China. So the Chinese people, they want the big kernel, and then that is all. I think that is suitable also. You know, like in Vietnam, they produce. I mean, they buy a lot of big cashew nut from Cambodia, and they process the one with 160, 180, and 210 in order to penetrate the market in China. But they don't really process until the white kernel. They just, you know, they just the take out the cell, and then they roast with the salt and then sell a lot to China. So even like here, like not here, like recently, there's the price of raw cashew nut a little bit high, especially for the dry cashew nut from Cambodia. And then if you are talking about the price in Vietnam, also a little bit high, because they are preparing all the kernel to sell to China before the Chinese New Year. that is the thing. So for me, I think the kernel is attractive, but you need to figure out what will be your market in your destination. That's very important. And on the top of that market also, so like Jim used to say that there's a niche market that we are looking for. For example, now the niche market and, you know, like the organic market, they are, you know, kind of increase a little bit more. So, but we are waiting for, you know, the COVID pandemic and the Ukraine war, and let's see next year and another a year. So what will be happen in the future? So we will try to do something like that. For example, like in Cambodia, if we are processing, we want if we, you know, the processing in Cambodia is the production cost is very expensive if we compare to Vietnam. So then that's why it's very hard for Cambodia also to you know, to find the right market, because people normally in the world, I think it's not anywhere, but in the world, they want a high quality with the lower price. that is with the culture. So, but Cambodia, we will try to find out, you know, the way that we can introduce the good kernel for the good buyer. That's what we are looking for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim, before the last set of questions, I see a hand up. Subramanian, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Hello, Subramanian, you are muted. Please kindly unmute Subramanian. Jim, quickly, there is a question now who wants to know how many tons of RCN are produced by East Africa, Indonesia, Brazil, and Cambodia. If you can pick that quickly as Subramanian gets ready. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Mozambique about 140,000 tons. Tanzania this year probably somewhere like 240,000 tons. Indonesia about 120. Brazil about 125. Cambodia, more difficult to estimate, 700,000 plus maybe more than that in the coming year. That's a quick answer. We will look at production again in one of the presentations coming up.
Okay.
So tune in next time if you want some more details on that.
Because of time, I will have to move on to the very last question that I have, and it also goes to all of them. The question is about what your outlooks are in terms of kernels and RCN production for next year. And more importantly, we heard Jasvinda talking about a correction that is likely to occur next year. So in what form do you think this correction will take? Will there be collapse in prices, or what exactly is going to happen in the next year? So what are your outlooks? And I can start also with Jasvinda as you have introduced the issue of correction for next year.
Okay, so correction doesn't mean downward correction only. Correction
Okay.
can be upward correction also.
Exactly.
Usually people say correction in stock market, that markets are correcting, which means they're going, no. So what I'm saying is correction means correction of inventories. If I have bought too much, I'm going to rationalize my inventory. When I say correction, which means if the raw cashew nut sellers are not looking at kernel parity and basing their prices, they will have to correct their way of looking at things. Yes, kernel prices are attractive for everybody at this level, as I said, and they were always attractive. I mean, because cashew is on a growth trajectory for consumption. But as I said, if the borders are closed, if there are wars, if there is currency depreciation and these things which are not fundamentally governed by the laws of economics, it is governed by the geopolitical events, then a lot of markets are closed for us to sell. Right? Vietnam is open for processing. If tomorrow the demand comes, Vietnam can ramp up to even 3 million tons of processing. I mean, Vietnam has done 2 million tons imports, domestic crop and Cambodia put together. Vietnam has processing capacity of 3 million tons. So there is no dearth of processing if demand comes. Vietnam can take everything, whatever is available. So when I said correction means essentially whatever happened during COVID was not rational. It was not was happening every time. This was one of an event. And because of that, things have to go back to the normal. And once they go back to normal, you will see that prices may be going back to a higher trajectory. This is what we meant by correction. I by no sense I want to demotivate anybody. Yes, prices are very attractive. I think prices will rise a little bit from here to April because large crops, they will come only in month of April in Vietnam. Even if you have a harvest in February or January, by the time it reaches Vietnam, it's going to be April and May only. So the supply in our country is going to be, or origin is going to be only April onwards. So there is where we feel that prices may soften again. And from now till April, we may see, say, 10 to 15 cents or maybe even 20 cents of kernel prices rising, which may translate into maybe $100 of RCN prices. But RCN prices were always not in parity. So therefore, if you have to sell to Vietnam, you have to go back to a right price where Vietnam can buy for this thing. India, on the other hand, as Amit has said, the kernel prices are very attractive and they can perhaps sell it in the domestic market for a better realization. So India is the go-to market. But one must also be careful that, India has an appetite. And beyond that appetite, India will not be able to consume your entire 1.5–2 million tons. Then you will have to again go back and look to Vietnam. This year, what happened? Everybody waited. Okay, let's sell to India. Let's sell to India. And they sold to India. We've seen problems once the markets came down. Right? There were defaults. There were issues because everybody sold much more than what India could take on that period. Even if you were getting $30–40 lower, and if you could move it to Vietnam, I would still say it would have been a better strategy that sell to both the origins. You cannot bring your entire produce to India because India would have a universe of total consumption. Once you go beyond that, then that market gets saturated. Yeah. So please don't worry on my comment on correction. I'm again repeating, we may, or I feel prices will go up for the next 3 to 4 months because we've already seen a good drop. And then once the supplies, this is the thinking of, as Jim said, in boardrooms, what they are doing is they are trying to do bookings for the first quarter and they are waiting to look at second quarter.
So Amit, maybe you can also take it. What is your outlook for next year and what correction do you think will okay?
Well, we are seeing that kernels are fairly at its lowest. So I was smiling all through the time Jaswinder was talking that when I meant correction, I didn't mean a downward correction. It could be upward as well. So technically, that's what we are even thinking, because this year a lot of imports came in, and in India today, there is not a single factory that is sitting idle, especially until Diwali. All the factories were running packed. So there was a lot of supply into the market. Now that Diwali is over, the supply is slowly going to come down. But since we have already projected a good sales, coming up in the next 3-4 months, so the prices will stay fairly there, or we can see a, plus or minus, you can see an upside of 5% from the current prices. Then for the next season, I think it's too early and too immature from my side to comment at this point of time.
Andara?
I totally agree with both of them, and because Cambodia, actually we don't really process a lot. We just sell, like Jim said, their own 97% to Vietnam, so we rely more on Vietnam market. But we are now in the process of developing our cashew nut processing facility. And we are like I am the president of the Cambodia Cashew Federation. There's a lot of a process that they are under me, and then they already give me some data that they already have the buyer in hand, and then they expect even the price, like the price more, and the demand in more, because in Cambodia we are not talking much more on the world market, but we are talking that what we can process in the good quality kernel for our buyer, because the buyer is there, but our facility is very low in the meantime. So we normally have more buyer than than supply. So in terms of the kernel. So to be honest with you, so even the raw cashew nut and the kernel will be increasing in in the future.
Okay, so thank you very much, Andara, Jaswinder, and Amit, for the great inputs you have made, and also to Jim Fitzpatrick, back to you to also let us know what we should expect for the next and the last GME for the year, the 45th edition, and so that we will know what kind of inputs to expect from your end.
Well, next time we're going to look at a little bit backwards, and we'll review 2022 and we'll look forward to 2023. And the basic approach is that the cashew value chain or supply chain worldwide is complex. It's not really in line with buyers' needs, and this has been impacted by the pandemic. On the other hand, trends in consumer demand, as we've heard from Amit for India, for example, have been magnified during the pandemic, and we have seen new forecasts emerging on demand for tree nuts